Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CEO podcast. This is the trailer episode. It's the first one in a whole series. I hope you'll enjoy this journey together. I hope you'll be able to stay throughout the series, and I hope that you will share and invite with your friends and family. So, for the trailer episode, I thought it would be cool and nice to just introduce myself so that you know who I am and you get a whole scope of what this podcast will be about. So, to start off, I think probably I'll just tell you a small story, a background story to who I am and how I got into media and how I got to deciding on why I want to do this podcast. My name is Nicole Rudo Jamu. I don't like people to call me Rudo though. So a lot of people just call me Nicole. Others prefer calling me Nicole Jamu, depending on the environment. Most of my workmates call me with my first and my surname. But if you're meeting maybe in a social setup, you probably just say Nicole, or you can call me Nikki. My radio audience knows me as Queen Nicole. The reason why I call myself Queen, I think it's just my parents wanted to impart something in me. Growing up, my dad just used to call me Queen. I think it was just for him, a way of him to impart a certain level of confidence and some positive energy around me. He also used to call my brother a doctor. So it wasn't just me. He used to do that with all of my siblings. So my family, I've got two brothers. I'm the only girl. So I think you've got a whole scope of the personal me, besides my work, obviously. Grew up in a family that was quite intact. My mom and my dad are still very much alive. They were very involved in our lives growing up. We never had issues where they were not together in any way. Although my dad, for quite a huge chunk of my life, I think primary school, most of it, and half going into high school, he used to work out of town, but we knew for a fact that every weekend he'd be back at home. Would spend time together. So I can't really say that I never got the best of my parents' love. They were always very present, always very involved in my work, and they still are to this day, which I think is a blessing. Whenever I'm on radio, whenever I'm on TV, trust you me, they tuned in like every single day. Even the times that I did midnight shifts on radio, my parents would wake up just so they can listen to me. And right now, my schedule, like I have really early days most of the time. I leave the house sometimes at 1 in the morning, sometimes at 3 in the morning. And my mom wakes up every single day to see me off to work. So we've had a really good relationship, and nothing that I would complain about. But not saying that we didn't have any challenges. We do have challenges, as everyone else does. But for the most part, they've been really supportive in my journey. But starting off media, it wasn't really straight up. I wasn't really set on me getting into media. I think it was more of a calling and more of fate deciding that this is my space. And as someone who believes in God, I really strongly believe that this is a journey that He had planned out for me. I don't know why I'm getting emotional now, but I think maybe it just explains the depth of what it means to me. So, just like any other child growing up, you have a dream of what you want to do and what you want to get into. And growing up initially, I remember wanting to be a teacher for some time. Early in primary school, I wanted to be a teacher. I felt I wanted to impact people's lives. And and I think most of it also came from me wanting to emulate my mom so much, because my mom is a teacher even up to today. She's a preschool teacher. So I think maybe that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get into teaching. But when I got into like mid primary school, I had somehow decided I wanted to become a medical doctor, and that carried me into high school, actually. I was a science student, a science class student. I was studying biology, physics, all of that difficult stuff, because I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. But by the time I got to lower six, my mind had changed again, and this time around I wanted to do social work. I also thought that I wanted to make a change. I wanted to impact people in a positive light. So I thought maybe the best way is for me to get into social work. I wanted to do psychology as well. I know back then we were not really talking much about mental health issues that we are focusing on a lot now. But yeah, I really felt I had a part to play in just making sure that everyone is well taken care of, both mentally and physically. So it was either social work or psychology. So when the time came for me to now make applications for university programs, I actually had no intention of doing my tertiary education in Zimbabwe. So I was busy sending my applications outside of Zim. My first port of call was South Africa for some reason. I made applications to some of the biggest universities in South Africa. I sent through to UJ, Nelson Mandela University. I got accepted to two. Nelson Mandela did accept me, and they actually offered me social work. But on a random day, this was about a week before my departure, because me and my parents had actually settled on me taking on this program and moving to Nelson Mandela University. And like most of my expenses were actually paid for. But just on a random day, my mom decided out of the blue she didn't want me to go anymore. So you can imagine how I felt. I was so dejected. I was so angry at her for letting me go through all the trouble of, making all these applications. And when you're moving away and you're taking a new step, you're excited about the whole journey. And suddenly it's halted. Like, she just told me, no, you're not leaving. So I remember feeling very sad and isolating myself for almost a month, not talking to anyone in the house, just angry and crying over it. And I had to start making applications home because she didn't want me to leave the country anymore. So I started sending my applications around. And my first port of call in Zim was the Midland State University. I don't even know why I chose to send my application there, but that was the only university that I sent my application to in Zimbabwe. My parents gave me money to make applications at University of Zimbabwe, and I spent it. I spent it. I didn't even bother to go there, and I lied that they didn't accept me. But I just didn't want to go there, and I didn't want to tell them that I don't want to go to this university. So when the time came now for the acceptance letters to come through, I did find out that I had been accepted, but it wasn't for a program that I had applied for. So in my list of programs, I had applied for human resources, I had applied for development studies and psychology, because I felt those were the most resonating to the thing that I wanted to get into, like a career I wanted to tap into full time. So when the names came out, my name was under film and theater arts. I had spent days looking and just wanting to know what kind of program I had gotten into, and because I didn't think get accepted in a media faculty because I hadn't applied for any of that. I wasn't looking under that. I was looking at social sciences. I was looking in the economics department. And I wasn't seeing my name anywhere. So my friend called me, I think about a week later after the acceptance letter had come through. And she told me my name was under Film and Theatre Arts. So I was so angry again, very angry for the fact that I had not applied for that program at all. And I felt they had made a very huge mistake. So I traveled to the university. I told them what I wanted. No, I don't want this program. I really don't feel like I'm a performer. I don't feel like I have a place in the media industry. And they were very understanding. So they had actually agreed for me to switch departments. So when the day came for us to go to school, I did the whole registration process. And what I was supposed to do now was to go to the head of department for psychology because I had settled on moving to psychology, and I needed to have the head of the department sign off the letter. And I also had to go to my head of department under Film and Theatre Arts for them to sign and agree for the transfer to happen. But ironically, or should I say coincidentally, on that very same day, there was a seminar that was held because the Film and Theatre Arts department was still quite new, and the chairman of the department felt that a lot of people were not really familiar with the program. And so they had brought in a lot of people to come through and just explain on the opportunities and what the program could do for you if you potentially want to become a student in that department. And it was also meant to boost their numbers in the department. So I decided to stay. I was like, okay, maybe I should just attend the seminar and find out what this program is all about. So I went in, and as the people came and gave their presentations, I actually kind of realized, I think I could enjoy this. So I ended up changing my mind and not wanting to leave Film and Theatre Arts anymore. So the whole transfer was again cancelled, and that's how I got to study for that degree. So the reason why I say it was fate was because this was a random pick, something that I had not even thought of, something I didn't even know existed at that university, but I was one of the few ones that were chosen. In my class, there was just 14 of us. So I think, it says a lot about my journey. But beginning my media career, starting off with my degree, initially my parents were very much against it. And I think a lot of you young people who are listening in right now can relate to this. So many parents are against non-conventional careers. They want you to be doctors, lawyers, teachers. It's fine as long as you're doing something that's that they're used to. But you getting into a film institute or telling them you want to be a musician or you want to be a soccer player, it's very hard to explain that it's actually an industry that you could earn a living from. And that's something that I personally enjoyed. My parents were very much against it. They didn't even like the program. I don't know what gave them the impression that I would be stuck doing theater and comedy. Zana Kafupi, if you're Zimbabwean, you know what I mean. So it took a while for me to convince them that I actually enjoyed doing that and that I totally saw myself making a living off it. The first instance where they actually accepted that I could make money from it was when I was part of a production that was done by Tsitsi Dangarembwa. For those of you who are into novels or into Zimbabwean film, you definitely know that she's a big name in the industry. And when they saw that I actually made it through an audition that had 500 plus people trying out for the same role that I got, they just so that I was really serious about the craft and I was willing to go the extra mile. And within like a few months after doing that, I got into theater. I was at the Charles Austin Theater. I was a part of almost every theatrical production they had, where whilst I was still in Mashingo. I worked with guys like Michael Kitani Banda. I was working with Kuzai Chingeza. You know her as Mbuya Pearson. We were together at 2017. I worked with Sydney Taiva Vashe. He went on to produce Sana Gonarejo, the movie. I think it was also part of retelling the Mugabe story. I'm not quite sure, but I think he had a role to play in it. I was also worked with Charles Mganasa, who's also like a scriptwriter, and he's had a tremendous role to play in the creative industry as a whole. Just to mention a few. So when my parents saw that I was doing all of that and I was having fun, I was enjoying it, I was making money that could sustain me. I wasn't even asking for money for upkeep from them anymore. So yeah, that's when they actually accepted that no, this could actually be something that I could do for an entire lifetime and that could have a comfortable life and make money from it. So I think just a word of encouragement, if you really love something, just go ahead and do it, because sometimes the people that you expect to support you don't even understand your dream. Maybe they don't want you to get into that space, but you know you for yourself, you know what you enjoy, you know what you could want to do for your lifetime. So I'd say go for it. It's gonna take a while. It will take tears. It will take your time. You will get depressed. You will lose friends, but it's all worth it. So I graduated out of university in 2018 from Midland State University, as I just said. And I was home for about 2 or 3 months, but that was quite horrible because I'd always been like a very active child growing up. I've never liked staying idle. I think even people that know me now know that I do a lot of things and I just don't like focusing on one thing, and I don't like just laying idle. So those couple of months were very tumultuous for me. They were very torturous. I did not enjoy staying at home and knowing that I wasn't making any money. I wasn't doing anything. So yeah, I was making applications though. At that time, I thought I would get into public relations, but it didn't work out. It didn't work out the way I thought it would. So I started looking at media institutions now. I started doing auditions for radio. I did a couple of auditions. I was shortlisted, but never got called back. You know, when you make it to the top 10, but you just don't make it to the final spots. And I think for people who are into the entertainment industry, and especially if you're in radio, TV, acting, you know that it's very difficult. And even for anyone in any other institution or any other industry, really, just the process of you sending an application and you being asked to come in for an interview, which is the equivalent to an audition if you're speaking of creatives, and not getting a call back that you actually got the job. It's a very difficult process, and sometimes you get to a place. Now, the worst thing, and especially if you're talking in the creative industry, is that now you get to know the person who actually got the job, and you know, oh, so they decided to put this person instead of me, which I think makes it even harder comparing it to other people, because if you don't get the job, you most probably won't even get to find out who was chosen for the job. So yeah, it's very difficult. It was a very difficult time just going for auditions and not getting a place. So there was a time when I really felt like quitting, but I don't know how. I just kept going. So just because I was kind of not getting a gist or not getting a place in the places that I wanted to be, I sat down, had an honest conversation with myself, and I decided to re-strategize. Now, this was me deciding that I was going to start with a smaller radio station, and if possible, I would work my way up. So, on a random day, I just spoke to a friend who was based in Zhishavane, and we agreed I would go over and they would help me with the expenses for the next coming months after my application. So I did exactly that. I moved from home. I went to Zhishavane, and by that time, I had not even got the job. This was just me moving in plain faith that it was going to work out. So I left Harare. That was, I think, around August of 2018. The official graduation ceremony had not even been done by that time. I went to Zhishavane, and the only station that was in my mind was Ya FM. Now, if you're someone who knows me, you know that it actually ended up working because that's when my journey started. But I got to Ya FM. They had not put out any vacancy notice. This was just me getting to the station and telling them I wanted to join them. So I got to the station, my first trial. I had my CV and everything. I was really quite optimistic and very excited about the opportunity. So I got there and I left my CV, waited to get the call. It didn't come. It never came, actually. 3 weeks after that, I went back again with a second copy of my CV. Now, the most surprising part is when I went there for the second time, they didn't find my CV. They did not have my CV that I had dropped off 3 weeks earlier. So I left another copy because I had anticipated they wouldn't have it. Second time, I just left it. They just told me, no, we don't have any vacancies at the moment. Just leave your CV here. We'll call you back. And I went back. And by that time, I think I stayed about a month with no follow-ups whatsoever. And after that month, now I was getting depressed because all of my friends that I knew were either going for masters, some were working, others were at home, but they were comfortable. But I wasn't comfortable with where I was, and I would get depressed. I would cry. Until on a random day, I just decided I'm not going to sit here and cry all day. It's better for me to just go and give it a third try. And if it doesn't work out, I had decided I was going to travel back home. So luckily for me, on that day, I got to the station, and this time around, I had an opportunity to meet the station manager at the time, and I was lucky enough that he paid attention to me. He asked me, okay, Nicole, you're here, where are you from? He saw from my CV that it had a Harare address on it, which meant I wasn't from Zhishavane at all. So he was asking me, you came all the way from Harare, how can you come all the way? And we didn't even put out a vacancy. Why are you so sure we will take you here? And I was just telling him, I just need a chance to get into radio. And so he asked me, what do you want to do? And because I had tried out being a radio presenter before and I hadn't really got the response that I liked, I thought to myself, let me try out news. So I told him I wanted to be an English news anchor. He asked me if I was sure if I could do it, and I said yes, I was. So I got into an immediate audition, something I had not even planned for. He put me into a studio, we recorded, he listened to the demo. Obviously, I was asked to get out of the room. He listened to it. And whilst I was anticipating to get the worst answer of my life, he told me I should start work the following day. Now, this was on a Wednesday, and I was thinking to myself, okay, best case scenario is if these guys actually like my reading, they'll probably ask me to join them on a Monday. But he told me, no, you have to be here tomorrow, meaning the following Thursday. So the next day I was there. before everybody else was there, I was the first person at the radio station waiting for the door to be unlocked. The only person was present was the security guard. So I went in, I waited for everybody else to come through. Yeah, and that's basically how my journey started. I volunteered for 8 months, not getting any salary, just getting into work, going back home. And it was difficult. I will tell you, it wasn't even an easy journey. Imagine not being able to buy yourself lunch or and you know how people are when it's month end and their salaries have just come through and everybody else is celebrating. Oh, we just got our monies, and they go and they spoil themselves, and you know for a fact that you can't afford to go buy yourself anything. So that was a journey on its own, and just the general reception. You get to a place, in your head you're thinking everybody else is going to be happy that you are there, to putting your input in a workplace, but that's not always the case. You get to a place and somebody feels certain and they don't like you. So a lot of things happened. It was a good learning experience. I won't take anything away from that, but it wasn't all rosy. There were days when it would rain and I would have to walk to work in an umbrella half wet because I couldn't afford to get into a taxi. So yeah, it was a really long journey. And how I got into radio, presenting like 3-hour shifts on a random day. One of the presenters wasn't present at work. They'd gone for school because they were doing online learning. But once it was examination season, they had to go in for sit in for the examinations physically. So those two girls were away, and the standby person was unavailable. The other standby person had other company business to attend to, and the only other person they could think of was me, because I was literally a third option, eh? I was not the first option. I was not the second option. I was the third option. And I had no prior experience of radio presentation, and especially for a 3-hour shift. The only thing that I knew was from listening to other presenters and just hearing how they do their thing. So they asked me to get into studio and do the show. Initially, I was supposed to just sit in for a day. So I got in, I did what I could to the best of my abilities, and to my surprise, people actually enjoyed the show. So before the show was even finished, the whole station manager had come into the studio and he told me, "Yo, Nicole, you're sounding so good. We're going to ask you to fill in and sit in through the show for the whole week." I was supposed to do it until the official presenters for the shift had come back. So that's when people actually started paying attention to me. Oh, this girl actually knows how to do her thing, because whenever somebody was in studio, I was always just eager to ask them, oh, how do I do this? I would learn. Amongst all the news anchors at the station at that time, I was the only one who knew how to operate the system, because I would always ask, oh, how do I do this? So it got to a point where everybody was just comfortable enough to let me read the news on my own, even in their absence. And that's basically how I learned how to operate the radio equipment at YFM. So that was how I integrated into radio. And my break onto national radio also came as somewhat a joke. I was just on my show. I would always post, oh, hey, I'm getting on to this shift at this time. I was the mid-morning host. This was COVID time, eh? And you know how stressful it would get sometimes. So at that time, we had shifts. I'd have 5 days of coming in studio continuously, and the other girl who I shared the block with would carry the show throughout the next 5 days, and I'd have to come back. So every time I was on radio, I would always post on my socials. And on that particular day, I posted on my Facebook and I just said, please listen to the show. It was the Charlebeg show. I don't know if it's still called the same right now, but that's what it was called when I was still there. Please listen in to the Charlebeg starting at 9 o'clock, ends at 12. This was just a regular post, and I had no idea who'd come across that post, but luckily, or should I say coincidentally, it came across somebody who was influential enough. And when they listened to my show, the person just came to my inbox and said, "Oh, you actually sound really good, and we think you're good enough to move to a national radio station." So I just thought it was a joke. I'm like, nah, no ways. Why would they be on my Facebook? But within the next couple of days, I had got some calls. I'd got some emails where I could record my demo. By the way, I didn't even know how to make a radio demo. So now I was busy on YouTube searching how to make a radio demo. But I eventually made the demo, sent it through. I was called in for a physical interview and a physical audition, which I did by myself and nobody else was there. And the rest is history. That's how I got onto national radio. So it's just to say that don't despise your humble beginnings. You never know where you will be. And just because you're not on a stage that you would have initially wanted to be on, it doesn't mean that you should take where you are for granted, because that could literally be a stepping stone to where you eventually want to go. So that's my journey in terms of radio. And how I started TV is actually another funny story. This was just me trying out. So one of my friends has a car rental company, and on a random day, they just asked me, they said, "Hey, Nicole, do you do like video commercials?" I said, "I've never done it before, but I can give it a try." So we linked up, we recorded the whole thing. Before we recorded, actually, I went to the place and I had a sit down with the team. I was just asking them like a brief conversation. So what do you intend to do with this information? What kind of information do you want to communicate with your potential clients? And we had a sit down. They had written a script already, but when I took a look at the script and what they had told me, it wasn't in cognizance, it wasn't making any sense. So we sat down again and we wrote the script together. Now, when it was now time for me to record the actual video and the actual information, I was just speaking offhand. I was now explaining from what I had understood from the conversation we had. And everybody who was there on the day just kept telling me, "Oh, you're such a natural at this, you should try out TV." Initially, I didn't even think too much into it. I was like, okay, that's a compliment, okay. But I didn't actually think that I would try out for TV. But by the time I showed my other circle when the infomercial had come out, and I was seeing the comments I was getting, and everybody just kept telling me the same thing. "Oh, you look good on camera. Oh, you're so fluent. Oh, you should try this." That's when I thought, okay, maybe this is a sign that I should actually try. So that's when I started like making an effort and just approaching people. I want to get into this program. How do I do it? Until eventually I met the right people and they told me what to do. I went and I recorded my audition. And by the time that there was a call out for presenters, because ZBC TV was now looking for new news anchors for TV. I was one of the other people that were called in for an audition, and I went in and I did what I knew I could do, and that's how I got a spot. So that's how I got onto TV, and from then on I've been getting calls, "Oh, we need you to do this," or "We've got a program that we want to do and we think you're the right person to do it." So that's basically my journey in media, and getting onto the podcast now, because I think just being on radio and being on TV especially, it means that a lot more people have access to you. A lot more people now know a little bit about you, or they think they know you. I would now get a lot of questions, and especially from young people and just from my coworkers. Sometimes they'll tell me, could say, oh, there's this person who needs help, and I would always be the first one to get called up to help them. I remember very lately there was a university student who came through, and we needed help with her dissertation topic. She wanted to do interviews, and my chief producer called me up and said, hey, I think you're the best person who could help her up with her dissertation. So that was a repeated trend that I saw. Okay, every time somebody needs something, I'm always the first one to get called. Or every time when they need someone to fill in for somebody else when they're not around, I'm always the first option to get called, and I would always get questions on how I got into media, or I'm in this scenario, what should I do? Like, people would always find it easy to open up to me. So that's how I thought, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. But me getting into the CEO now was a whole process on its own. I'd always wanted to do a podcast. Initially, I was supposed to do it with a friend. We had agreed that we were going to have a two-person podcast. It was supposed to be a girl podcast, just talking on girl issues. We had found somebody who kind of wanted to help at the time, but as time went on, we saw that we weren't really agreeing on a lot of things. So we decided to stop working with them. In fact, we hadn't even started working with them by the time that we discovered we were very different in terms of what we wanted to do with the podcast. So first, it was that. And secondly, when I started now doing my business segment on radio, I thought, oh, wow, nobody else is doing business, and I really like this. So I'm going to do a podcast that tells people on your business news, like what's going on in economics and all of that, because that's actually something that I'm enjoying now. But after further deliberation and just me wanting to make an impact and helping others break the barrier of getting into your goal and living your dream, and as somebody who knew how difficult that could be at times, I thought it didn't really resonate with who I wanted to be as a brand, as a person. So that's how I got into CEO now, which is really a platform that I want to share my personal journey. I want to bring other females who will be able to share their personal stories on how they've gone through life, the mistakes they've made. I want genuine conversations of people who can tell their true stories on the difficulties they faced and how they broke into their success now. And maybe not even success in the terms that you think, because I know a lot of people, when they think of success, they think of monetary value, but that's not what success is. It's not always monetary. Success is just living your happy place, things that make you happy. That's what I define as success. So that's how I got into wanting to do this project, the CEO. And I think the most asked question at the moment is, what is CEO? What does it mean? This is just slang, yay? Because I thought to myself, well, a lot of people, I don't know if it's a compliment, but a lot of people just always come up to me and say, hey, you look like your office material. You don't look like somebody who's on radio. Like, even when I'm going for a midnight shift, people will be like, oh, wow, you look so good. You look like office material. You look like CEO material. And you don't think like a regular radio person. Because I think just here in Zimbabwe, mostly radio personalities are stereotyped as people who are not really smart. I don't know why, but that's just a general stereotype that I have come across a lot. I don't know if it's true for other radio presenters, but for me personally, those are the types of comments that have been made a lot. And for them, I seemed to not be stereotypical in that way. I seem to have broken a barrier of some sort. So CEO is basically a female CEO, a she that's a CEO. And I thought that I wanted to help fellow females in whatever space they are. It doesn't matter if you're a working mom, it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom, if you're not in media, like whatever walk of life you're from. I just wanted to help out in giving you the right mentality and just giving you the basics on how to get into the things that you love the most. So that's how I got into CEO. So it's basically just a she that's a CEO. So that's the name. But yeah, I really hope that you will be able to stay through the journey. Obviously, I will be bringing people, as I said, guests, not necessarily all female guests, but people that have a story to tell, and one that's inspirational and one that is motivational, one that's powerful enough to get you to break out of your little cocoon, something that will be able to change your perspective on life in general, something that will be able to empower you to become your truest self. So that's what this is about. And thank you so much for pressing play and for tuning in into the trailer episode. I might have gone on and on just blabbering. I'm a radio person. It's quite expected. But I hope that you'll be able to stay throughout the other episodes and we can walk through this journey together. If you want to find out more about what I do, you can find me on social media at Nicole Jamu. That's NicoleJamu. That's my social media handles on all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I also have a website at www.nicolejamu.com. You can just have a full scope of what I do. Is showed everything, every project that I've ever undertook. And that's also where you can get updates about this podcast. I will be uploading all of my podcast episodes on that platform as well. You will also find me on YouTube if you're not already watching the video. If you're not watching the video editor of this, if you're just listening to the audio, you can find me on YouTube. It's at Nicole Jamu still. I will be putting out other content besides just this podcast. So there's so much more that's going to be coming on that platform alone. But yeah, I wish you all the best and I want you to stay. That's all that I can say. But thank you so much for pressing play on this episode. Catch you on the next one. Bye.